Imagine sitting at Christmas lunch and your own mother announces, in front of everyone, she's not family anymore. No warning, no reason, just a public execution over dessert. What they forgot was one tiny detail. Every bill, every plan, every safety net they relied on was in my name. This is how I turned their betrayal into my revenge. Watch till the end, because the last move was mine. My name is Melissa, I'm 41 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The air inside the restaurant was warm, filled with the soft clatter of silverware and the syrupy hum of holiday music that always felt 2 notches too cheerful. I could smell cinnamon from someone's mulled wine a table over, and the faintest hint of burnt sugar from the crème brûlée torching behind the bar. We were at Langford's, an upscale place my mother liked to call quaint, even though it screamed retirement money and midlife crisis martinis. The hostess took one look at our coats and jewelry and walked us straight to the front section with the big windows and white tablecloths. Candles glowed in little glass cylinders. I shrugged off my wool coat, feeling the blast of heat after the December air, while my mother kissed the hostess on the cheek like they were old friends. We slid into the booth, leather still cool under my tights. I ended up on the inside, next to my brother, exactly where my mother wanted me. Contained, across from her, in her line of fire. She ordered a Chardonnay before the waitress even finished the greeting. I asked for water with lemon. My brother went for a whiskey he couldn't afford if I stopped bailing him out, and Rebecca ordered some seasonal cocktail that looked like a cranberry spritz had a baby with a snow globe. The waitress had just set down our soup, lobster bisque, garnished like it had a college degree, and my brother was complaining about traffic like it was a personal attack. He went on about some guy in a black SUV who cut him off on the freeway, like it was proof the world had a personal vendetta against him. My cousin Rebecca was picking cilantro out of her salad, her fiancé trying not to look bored, scrolling his thumb over his phone screen under the table when he thought no one could see. There was laughter, forks clinking, the sound of wine being poured, the dizzy glow of people in sweaters and sparkly dresses pretending they liked their families more in December. I remember the way the steam from the bisque rose up in little coils, hitting my face and fogging my glasses at the edges. The soup smelled rich, buttery, like vacation money. I lifted the spoon, blew on it, and pretended I wasn't bracing for the thing I knew was coming. Because you always know with Judy, she doesn't just erupt, she stages. She sets the scene, invites the witnesses, and then drops the bomb right when everyone has their mouths full. Then my mother cleared her throat. It was not a casual throat clear. It was that deliberate small sound she made before she announced something at church potlucks or PTA meetings. Fork down. Cloth napkin dabbed once against her mouth. Eyes locked straight across the table, right at me, like the rest of the restaurant had blurred out, and I was the only audience that mattered. And she said it. Mom, let's be clear. She's not family anymore. Silence. Actual, chest-thick, restaurant-slowing silence. The kind that makes you suddenly aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat, your own hands. I didn't flinch. Rebecca choked on her water, tried to cover it with a fake cough, her mascaraed eyes darting between me and my mother. My brother stared harder at his plate, like the mashed potatoes had become suddenly fascinating, his jaw tightening in that way it did when he wanted to say something, but liked his comfort too much to risk it. I felt one of the servers slow his walk behind us. The music didn't pause, but it felt like it should have, like even the speakers were embarrassed to keep playing Mariah Carey over this little family execution. My hand stayed on the water glass. I brought it to my lips and took a calm sip. It was automatic by then, this performance of serenity. Years of learning how to make my face a smooth surface when Judy went looking for cracks. Inside, though, Inside, I could feel the sting rising, not just from the words, but the intent behind them. She wanted it to sting. She wanted the declaration to be public, undeniable. A disowning disguised as dessert conversation. I could see it in the way her shoulders squared, in the smug little tilt of her chin, like she had finally nailed the monologue she'd rehearsed in the bathroom mirror that morning. She wanted someone to overhear. She wanted witnesses. But I didn't give her the drama she was baiting for. I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a sarcastic one. Just still. A soft curve of my mouth that said I had survived worse storms than this, that told her nothing about what was actually happening inside me, because I already knew something they didn't. I wasn't the one who needed family. They needed me. That truth sat calm and solid in my chest like a stone at the bottom of a lake. I could feel the hurt rippling around it, but the stone did not move. My pulse slowed. The first shock passed, and in its place there was a strange, clean kind of clarity. My mother, Judy, had always been that kind of woman. Crisp voice, manicured fingers, the type to say, "Bless your heart," like it was both a prayer and a threat. Growing up, I told myself she wanted control because she loved us, because she wanted the best for us, even when she corrected my posture, my hair, my tone, the boys I liked. Now I know she mostly loved being adored. As long as you played your part, she kept you in the picture. Smiling for the Christmas card, showing up for church brunch, laughing at her jokes even when they were at your expense. The moment you made her uncomfortable, or worse, inconvenient, she'd cut you out like a coupon that expired. That holiday lunch wasn't random. It was a performance. A final act in a play she'd been scripting for months. Maybe years, if I was being honest with myself. The guest list, the location, the timing, everything chosen to maximize impact. She didn't just want to hurt me. She wanted to rewrite the narrative right there at table 12, candles flickering, waiter hovering. Judy, the heartbroken mother. Melissa, the ungrateful daughter who forced this. I could see it so clearly I almost laughed. Me. "I'm still here, Judy. You don't need to make a scene." I said it softly, gently. Not because I wanted peace, but because I knew how much she hated being called by her first name in public. Judy belonged to her coworkers, to the bank, to the DMV. Mom was the role she curated, the one she performed like it was a job with benefits. Crossing that line in front of other people, even strangers, sliced through her image in a way nothing else could. Her nostrils flared just enough. It was the only crack she gave me. Her hand tightened around the stem of her wine glass, and I watched the muscles in her forearm tense under the sleeve of her cream sweater. "Mom." "No, Melissa. We've all talked. We agree. You've made your choices." She glanced around like she expected applause, like there was a secret family jury ready to stand and deliver a verdict. But no one jumped in. Not even my brother, who usually followed her lead like a shadow on a leash. He just swallowed, looked down, and shoved another forkful of potatoes into his mouth like he could bury his guilt in gravy. Choices. That word again. It had been showing up more and more in her texts and voicemails. Your choices, Melissa. The choices you're making. Like setting boundaries was the same as committing a crime. What they meant was, I'd stopped coming to every holiday. I'd told my brother to finally grow up and get a job that didn't require me to co-sign every time he defaulted. I'd skipped Rebecca's bridal shower because I was in Phoenix handling an audit for my firm, not at some spa ignoring their calls. What they really meant was, I had boundaries now, and women like my mother. They don't like daughters with boundaries. They like daughters with gratitude. With soft no problem, Mom, and of course I can help you. And anything for family. They like daughters who pick up when they call, who show up when they demand it, who apologize first even when they were the ones who got hurt. I sat back in my chair. let my fingers rest on the tablecloth. The fabric was thick, expensive, ivory with a faint gold weave. The kind that looks beautiful in candlelight and doesn't belong anywhere near cranberry sauce. I traced a tiny pattern in the weave with the pad of my finger, grounding myself in texture, in something neutral and solid that had nothing to do with Judy's performance. They all watched me, waiting, I think, for the explosion. My mother wanted me to raise my voice, to cry, to plead. She wanted a scene big enough that she could retell it later with herself as the calm, reasonable one who had no choice. I could feel Rebecca's eyes on me, wide and curious. I could feel my brother's shame settling over the table like a second tablecloth, the pleading, the tears, the angry walkout. All the things Judy had predicted in whatever version of this story she had already told to her friends from church and her book club. But I just said me. Okay. The word tasted strange in my mouth at first, like something too simple to be enough. But it sat there between us, small and heavy, and it shifted the air. And I meant it. Because I knew what was coming next. I had it all planned. I watched my mother blink, just once, thrown off by the lack of fight. There was a tiny hesitation, barely there, but I caught it. The script in her head did not include me being calm. It did not include me accepting the disowning like it was a weather report instead of a lightning strike. There was a reason I chose that restaurant. Langford's was downtown and busy, full of people who read financial magazines and actually looked at their bank statements, a place where certain conversations in public suddenly mattered. There was a reason I offered to cover the bill before the lunch even started. Judy liked to tell people she had helped me get where I was. She conveniently skipped the part where I put myself through college, took on the loans, worked 2 jobs, and learned how to read contracts like they were short stories. If there is one thing suburban parents like mine respect, it is whoever they think holds the check. Power looks like whoever signs at the bottom. And there was a reason I had that slim little folder in my bag, next to my phone, and a very specific post-it note I'd written a week ago in black Sharpie. The folder was navy, unremarkable from the outside, the kind of thing anyone might have. Inside, though, were copies, documents, numbers that told the real story of who needed whom. The post. It was small, stuck to the inside flap, with 3 lines of handwriting that only I had seen. A reminder. A boundary in ink. Walk away clean. Do not explain. Do not rescue. See, they thought words could erase me, that if they said it loud enough, with enough confidence, I'd just shrink. That I would become exactly what my mother needed me to be, the villain in her tragedy, the cautionary tale she told people when they asked why her daughter wasn't around as much. But I wasn't shrinking. I was calculating. I let my gaze drift around the table, really looking at them. My brother in the off-the-rack blazer I helped pick out for a job interview he never showed up for. Rebecca, with her gel manicure and the engagement ring tied to a loan with my name on it. My mother with her designer bag on the empty chair beside her. Bought on a girls' weekend I had paid for. Every single one of them tethered to me by numbers and signatures they barely even remembered. And they were about to learn what happens when the person you underestimate is also the one paying your phone bill. The waitress came by with a nervous smile, asking if we wanted anything else. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, a few flyaways stuck to her temple from the heat of the kitchen, and there was this tiny tremor in her voice when she spoke, like she could feel the storm sitting at our table even if she hadn't heard every word. I watched her glance at my mother first because people always did. Judy had that energy, that you're in my way aura that made service workers either overcompensate or disappear. My mom waved her off like swatting a gnat. Mom, we're done here. She didn't even look up when she said it. Just flicked her fingers in the air, the same way she used to dismiss my teenage arguments about curfews and college choices. The words came out clipped, too sharp for someone who'd just performed her big scene and supposedly won. There was no grace in it, no satisfaction, just tension, packed tight. But I caught it. Her hands. She'd folded her napkin into a neat little square, but her thumbs were giving her away. One thumb rubbing the side of the other over and over, a fast, anxious stroke. A tell I'd seen my entire life. Anytime she felt control slipping, her hands betrayed her. She wasn't as calm as she looked. That realization settled me. I felt my shoulders drop half an inch, the way they do when you finally understand you're not the one on the witness stand. I wasn't on trial here. She was. I folded my napkin slowly, mirroring her, but with intention. I smoothed it out, placed it beside the untouched half of my entree, aligning the edges with the table's seam. I could feel the tension crawling across the tablecloth like static, pricking the hairs on my forearms. No one dared speak. Not even Rebecca, who usually couldn't go 5 minutes without mentioning her wedding Pinterest board or the exact shade of mauve she'd chosen for her bridesmaids' dresses. Her hand hovered over her wine glass, then retreated like she didn't trust herself not to spill it. Brian was hunched over, elbows on the table, hands pressed together like he was praying to the mashed potatoes. His knee bounced under the table, making the silverware rattle in a faint, jittery rhythm. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That told me more than any speech ever could. And then I opened my bag quietly, reaching inside for the folder. Thin, gray, leather-bound. The leather was cool against my fingers, smooth and worn at the edges where I'd thumbed it open and shut at my kitchen table the night before. I had sat there under the harsh dome, light, coffee going cold beside me, double-checking every line item. Not because I doubted the numbers, but because I knew the pushback would be brutal. Judy never admitted to owing anything, not even an apology. I laid the folder flat on the table, right next to the check that had just arrived in its little black booklet. The hostess had slipped it there so discreetly, like she was trying not to interrupt a conversation she didn't understand. The server glanced between us now, eyes flicking from my mother's stiff posture to the folder to my face. He wasn't sure whether to clear the plates or back away slowly. "Take your time," he murmured, taking a tiny step back but not leaving entirely. "Mom." "What's that?" Her voice had that tone, suspicious and annoyed, like I'd brought a live animal to the table. She tilted her head, chin lifting, trying to reassert control with posture alone. "Me. Reality." I said it like a sigh, soft but certain. Not a jab, not a scream. Just a fact I was tired of carrying alone. Her eyes flicked to the folder like it might explode. I flipped open the folder and began reading. The pages made this small, clean sound as they turned. Paper on linen. Numbers meeting candlelight. Me. AT&T Family Plan. $212 a month, all under my account. That's your phone, Judy. Brian's too. Rebecca's line. Oh, and that iPad you take on cruises? That's on there, too. I watched the words land. My mother's shoulders tightened just a fraction. Rebecca's hand froze halfway to her necklace. Her fiancé straightened in his seat. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Mom." "Melissa." It was a warning. "Don't do this. Not here. Not like this." But I'd spent a decade not doing it. Not anywhere. Not ever. Me. Delta Dental. You've got a premium family plan. I've been paying the premiums since 2019. I could hear my own voice, level and steady, like I was reading from a quarterly report at work. No tremor, no heat, just data. I had learned early in my career that numbers cut through spin faster than any speech. I turned the page. My fingers were steady. My heart was too. If anything, I was calmer than I'd ever been around them. Me. Auto insurance, your car, Brian's truck. You switched to my bundle for the discount, never switched it back. I remembered the call. Judy on the other end of the line, voice sweet, asking if we could just do this for a little while, honey. Just until she paid off a few things. Just until Brian got back on his feet. Just until. Those words were another kind of debt. No one ever paid them down. There was a stillness around the table now. Everyone frozen. Rebecca looked like she'd swallowed her ice cube. Her lips parted, eyes wide. Her fiancé shifted his gaze to her, then back to me. Brian's knee had stopped bouncing. He sat rigid, staring at the folder like it was a live grenade and I was pulling the pins one by one. I didn't stop. Me. Capital One credit card. You used it last Christmas. Bought gifts for the whole family. Never paid the balance. I did. I remembered that one too. Christmas morning, Judy handing out presents with that tight smile, making sure everyone knew which ones were from her. A new watch for Brian. A Coach bag for Rebecca. Gift cards for the cousins. And me. Watching her swipe that card over and over at the mall a week before, knowing her checking account could barely survive a grocery run. Mom. We talked about that. She jumped on it fast, like a drowning person grabbing a floating branch. Me. You said you'd Venmo me, then never did. I didn't add the rest. The reminder texts. The call she ignored. The way she told Aunt Linda later that I was obsessed with money when I followed up. Her mouth pressed into a line. She hated being reminded of her own words. Judy liked to speak in suggestions and favors, things you couldn't quite nail down later. I'd learned to write everything down because of her. I slid the last page across the table. It was the restaurant receipt, printed from the online reservation system, already marked with my card information. Me. And lunch? Already charged to my account when I made the reservation. Because I knew you'd try to make a scene, so I made sure the bill would end with me, not start with you. I let that hang there for a second. Let her look at the date, the timestamp, the pre-authorized charge. Let her realize that even this little stage she'd chosen for her performance had been underwritten by the daughter she just declared wasn't family. My mother sat back like she'd been slapped. Her chair squeaked softly against the hardwood as she leaned away, one hand going to the neckline of her sweater like she suddenly couldn't breathe right. The color climbed up her neck, blotchy and uneven. Her mouth opened, then closed. No script, no rehearsed line, just a soft, strangled sound that never quite turned into a word. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to argue. For once, I didn't feel the usual urge to over-explain, to fill the silence, to spin it softer so she wouldn't feel attacked. The numbers spoke louder than any insult ever could. They sat there between us, printed in neat black ink, a decade of quiet sacrifice laid out like a balance sheet. Every line item was a little piece of the story I'd been living, the one where I played financial parent to a woman who never stopped calling herself the mother. Me. Since I'm not family anymore. I let my gaze rest on her when I said it, using her own words like a mirror. I watched the recognition flicker in her eyes, the moment she heard the echo and realized how it sounded now that it cost her something. I picked up the receipt. The paper crackled softly between my fingers. My hands were steady, my breathing slow. I felt strangely light, like I'd been carrying a backpack for years and had just set it down without fully realizing how much it weighed. Me. I should stop covering family expenses. The words were simple, but they hit like a hammer. I saw it in Brian's face first. Brian looked up for the first time. Really looked. He looked pale. The tan he usually bragged about from his lake days gone suddenly flat under the warm restaurant lights. A muscle jumped in his cheek. His eyes flicked from me to my mother, then back, like he was trying to find an escape route that didn't exist. Brian. Wait. What do you mean, stop? I knew what he was really asking. What about my truck payment? What about my phone? What about the gym membership that was still tied to my card? What about the safety net he'd mistaken for gravity? Me. Exactly what it sounds like. No more cushioning. No more automatic rescue. No more fixing the damage while they blamed me for using the broom. I stood. There was power in standing slowly, in feeling your body move with intention instead of impulse. I pushed my chair back, the legs making a soft scrape on the floor that somehow sounded louder than my mother's announcement had. I smoothed my coat with one hand, not rushing, not apologizing. I could feel the whole table watching every motion. Judy's eyes wide, wet at the corners now, but not from remorse, from fear. Rebecca's mascaraed lashes blinking too fast. Mark sitting very still, hands clasped together in his lap. Me. You wanted clarity, Judy? Here it is. Her name again. No, Mom. Just Judy. It tasted right this time. Honest. I looked each of them in the eye. My cousin, clutching her wine glass like it was an anchor. Her fiancé, suddenly very aware that marrying into this family came with fine print he'd never read. My brother, still that little boy who thought someone would always show up with a checkbook and a solution. And lastly, my mother. She couldn't hold my gaze for more than a second. Her eyes darted to the folder, to the receipt, to the other tables, like maybe someone would step in and tell her this was all a misunderstanding, that she was still the hero in this story. Me. You disowned me with words, I answered with numbers. Then I picked up the folder, placed it gently back in my bag, and adjusted my coat. The wool was soft against my hands. Familiar. I slid my arms into the sleeves like I was sliding into a new skin. I could feel eyes on us from other tables. Curious glances. People pretending not to stare but failing. I heard a woman at the next table whisper. Felt the shift of bodies turning just slightly in their chairs. Half-listened whispers floated around us. Little fragments. Family. Money. A server near the wine cart had stopped pretending to polish glasses. He held the stem of a goblet, motionless, his attention pinned to our table. I didn't care. Not in the way I used to. Not in the way that would have made me shrink and apologize just to smooth things over. Because the performance was over. Hers and mine. I wasn't the quiet daughter absorbing impact anymore. I wasn't the invisible sponsor behind their lifestyles, the convenient villain when they needed someone to blame. And this time, I wrote the final scene. I turned, took one last breath of the restaurant's warm, cinnamon-laced air, and walked away from the table. Away from the woman who thought she could erase me with a sentence. Away from the people who only remembered my value when the bill showed up. I walked out lighter. Not because it didn't hurt, but because for the first time in my life with them, the hurt came with a clean break instead of another bill. I didn't storm out. I didn't need to. Just the sound of my chair sliding back was loud enough in that heavy silence, the kind that hangs after something breaks, and everybody pretends they did not hear it, even though it is the only thing they hear. I could feel my heart pounding, not from fear, not even from anger, just release. Like something inside me had finally been set down after carrying it too long. My boots clicked softly against the hardwood as I walked toward the front. 3, 4, 5 steps, each one pulling me further out of their gravity. The soft murmur of other conversations came back into focus. Glasses clinking. A burst of laughter from a table near the bar. The faint hiss from the kitchen. Normal sounds, like my whole family had not just tried to erase me over lobster bisque. The maitre d' gave me a tight smile, that professional kind where the lips move, but the eyes are doing risk assessment. Is she okay? Do I say something? Do I pretend I did not just hear that? He glanced past me toward the table behind, then back at me. I didn't look back. I knew if I turned around and saw my mother's face, I might get hooked into one more round, one more argument, One more chance for her to cry or clutch her chest or suddenly make herself the victim again. I was done giving her that stage. Outside, the Michigan cold hit me like a slap, but it felt clean. The door swung shut behind me with a soft thud, cutting off the holiday music. The parking lot was silvered with frost. The sky that flat gray Michigan does so well in December. The wind bit through my coat as I stepped off the curb, sharp and unapologetic, stinging my cheeks and the tip of my nose. I pulled my scarf tighter. The sharp air felt better than anything inside that restaurant. Freedom is not warm. People like to sell it that way. Cozy and glowing. Real freedom, the kind you claw out of a lifetime of obligation, is cold and honest and wide open. It does not hug you. It just moves out of the way and says, "There, now it is on you." I stood at the edge of the parking lot for a second, just breathing. In, out. Watching my breath cloud in front of me in pale white bursts. The asphalt smelled like salt and exhaust. A car door slammed somewhere behind me and someone laughed as they hurried inside. Life kept moving. No dramatic soundtrack, just a woman standing alone in the cold, realizing she had finally stepped off the script. And then I laughed. Not loud, not wild, just a small, cracked sound that got caught in my scarf. It surprised me, but it was real. A release valve, because it was finally over. The game, the guilt, the performance they had all expected me to keep giving year after year. Responsible Melissa, problem-solving Melissa, Melissa who will figure it out. Melissa who can take a joke when they talk about how she is married to her job. I walked to my car, my boots crunching over a thin crust of ice. My silver Honda sat under a streetlight dusted with salt. I unlocked it, slid into the driver's seat, and shut the door. The car wrapped around me with that familiar hollow thud, turning the outside world into a muffled blur. I sat there with the engine idling, my hands still on the steering wheel, watching my breath fog the air until the vents finally began to push out lukewarm heat. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel everything. I did not shove it down. I did not pick up my phone and check emails. I just sat there, staring at the dashboard and let it all roll through. The grief. For the version of family I used to picture when I was a kid. For the mother who only existed in my imagination, the one who hugged first and judged later. For all the holidays I had spent trying to hold everybody together. The relief. That I had actually done it. That the words had left my mouth, and the folder had been opened, and there was no way to pretend I had not drawn a line. Relief that the secret ledger I had carried in my head was not invisible anymore, at least not to me. And the anger I had been tucking into spreadsheets and gift cards and polite holiday smiles. I could feel it there, deep and steady. All the times I was told I was overreacting when I mentioned a bill. The way my mother would say, "Money is not everything, sweetheart." In the same week, she asked me to cover another payment. Because here is what they never understood. I was never the emotional one. I was the functional one, the one who fixed things, the one who paid bills on time, who sat on hold with insurance companies, who remembered due dates and passwords, the one who filled in every blank space so no one else had to even see it. When our dad died, I was 24. Brian went off the rails for a while, drinking, spending, disappearing for days. Mom curled into herself and blamed the universe. I stepped in. I managed the funeral costs. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, writing numbers while my mother cried in the next room. I called funeral homes, compared prices, asked questions I never thought I would ask before 30. I filed the insurance claims, dug through drawers for policy numbers, sat on hold listening to tinny jazz while some stranger processed my father's death. Like it was just another task on their list. I canceled his memberships and credit cards. I called the bank and gave them the date of death so many times it stopped sounding like a real date. I paid off his hospital debt using what little I had left from my savings account. That money had been meant for my future, grad school, a move out of state. Instead, it went to keep collection agencies from calling my mother every night at dinner. I was the one who kept the lights on, literally and metaphorically. I set up automatic payments so the utilities would not get shut off when my mother forgot what day it was. I fixed the leaky sink with parts from Home Depot. I stocked the freezer before I drove back to my place. They called it help back then. They told people, "Melissa has been such a help." My mother would squeeze my hand in public and say, "I do not know what I would do without her." Now they called it selfish. Not with that exact word. They used softer labels. Career obsessed. Too independent. Not very family oriented. But the message underneath was clear. How dare you stop giving? That is the thing about family. They love your sacrifices until you stop offering them. As long as you are pouring, they will praise you. The second you set the pitcher down, they act like you stole something. It was gradual, the way they started erasing me. No big explosion, just omissions. First, missed invites. I would see pictures from dinners I had never heard about. My mother would shrug and say, "Oh, it was last minute. We did not think you would want to come all the way." Then I stopped being on the group text. At first I thought I had muted it. Then I realized there was a new thread without me. The one where plans were actually made. When I asked, Brian laughed and said, "It is just memes. You are not missing anything." "Melissa is too busy with her career" became their favorite joke. I heard it in the background on calls, at holidays, little digs dressed up as humor. I tried to explain at first. "I have a deadline. I cannot just walk out of a meeting, Mom." Eventually, I stopped. You cannot convince people to respect what they resent. I stopped asking why. Because deep down, I knew. When a woman stops giving, they start calling her difficult. I had seen it already. My aunt left a marriage after decades, and overnight she went from such a trooper to unstable. When she was carrying everything, they praised her. When she put it down, she became the villain. No one noticed the shift in me, because I hid it well. I still sent birthday cards, still booked the Airbnb for family reunions because no one else wanted their card on the reservation. Still answered panicked texts about overdraft fees with transfers and mild lectures that landed nowhere. But inside, I was unraveling. I lay awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, doing math in my head. Not just dollars. Years. I asked myself how I could feel this necessary and this disposable at the same time. How I could be the one they called for every crisis and still be treated like the optional extra. I started therapy last year. It felt strange to admit I needed help with something I could not measure. I am good with things that fit into rows and columns. Emotions do not. But one night after another phone call about another late bill that was somehow my fault, I Googled therapists and made an appointment. It took me months just to say my mother's name without bracing. At first, I talked about work, stress, my team. Carla, my therapist, kept asking about support, about what happened when I was not at the office. I kept skirting around it until one session when I said, "My mom," and felt my whole body tense. The most important thing Carla ever said to me came after I spent 20 minutes calling myself selfish. I told her how guilty I felt for letting calls go to voicemail, for not wanting to drive across town to fix another crisis, for feeling angry when my brother texted, "Hey, can you spot me again? You know I will pay you back." She listened. Then she said, very calmly, "You are not selfish. You are exhausted." That one sentence cracked something open. I cried harder than I had in years. It felt like someone had finally named the thing I had been dragging behind me. Not selfish. exhausted, overextended, done. After that, I started making lists, not of groceries or deadlines, lists of all the things I did that no one ever saw: monthly insurance payments, the phone bill that hit my account like clockwork, the auto insurance, the dental premiums, last-minute gifts for people who never said thank you, teacher gifts, shower gifts, a baby registry item for a cousin who called me bougie but still sent her link. The time I drove 4 hours to pick Brian up from a DUI checkpoint, leaving a work trip early and lying to my boss. The weekend I spent filling out his paperwork so he would not lose his license. The story I fed my mother about a flat tire so she would not spiral. Quiet things, invisible things. I filled pages in a cheap notebook, my handwriting digging into the paper. Every line made it harder to gaslight myself. Harder to pretend I was imagining the weight. And it hit me. If I disappeared tomorrow, the only thing that would collapse faster than their opinion of me would be their finances. That thought did not feel empowering. It felt like standing in a house you built and realizing no one inside even knows you are the one who poured the foundation. So I made a decision. Not out of vengeance, not out of bitterness, out of clarity. I was done being their silent safety net. The invisible scaffolding holding up their lives while they took shots at me for not showing up to every brunch. I did not cut them off overnight. Real life is not a switch. I started with small no's. I cannot put that on my card. I cannot make it this weekend. I cannot talk right now. Each no felt like lifting a weight that had been bolted to my chest. And that holiday lunch. It was the exit interview. The moment where everything I had been quietly shifting inside finally showed up on the table in black and white. The day they thought they were firing me from the family, and I walked in with a record of every unpaid invoice attached to my name and told them, calmly, that I was the one resigning. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. No texts, no emails, not even one of those fake sweet voicemails my mom used to leave where she would say, "Just checking in," but really meant, "You have embarrassed me." I thought maybe they had finally gotten the message. Maybe the silence was acceptance. Maybe it was surrender. Maybe they were sitting around that kitchen table of theirs, rewriting the story so they did not have to say out loud that I had walked away. But on the 4th day, the silence cracked. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I was at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet that made more sense than my family ever had, sipping bad office coffee out of a mug with a fading company logo. First, it was a notification from my AT&T account. 4 failed login attempts. The email subject line was blunt. Unsuccessful sign in attempt. I clicked it open and felt that old familiar twist in my stomach. The one I used to get when my mother would call and say, "We need to talk about money." Then another notification. Same thing. Different timestamp. Then a lockout alert. Too many attempts. Your account has been temporarily locked for your security. I sat back in my chair and just stared at the screen for a second. I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. I could see it so clearly. My mother sitting at her laptop, Brian hovering behind her, maybe Rebecca on speaker, trying to guess my password, trying old birthdays, pet names, the street we grew up on. Treating my account like it was just another family resource that would eventually bend. They did not want me, but they needed access to what I built. The account. The plan. The safety net that lived in my name. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. Brian. "Hey, look. About the other day. I didn't know Mom was going to say that stuff." I read the text once, then again. The little gray bubble sitting there like a half apology that had gotten lost on the way out of his thumbs. "No, I am sorry. No, I should have spoken up." Just a weak hand reaching back toward the bridge they had set on fire. Me. "You knew. You just didn't stop her." My thumbs moved before my guilt could, before I could soften it, before I could protect him from the truth. He read it, but did not respond. I watched the word read appear under the blue bubble. Then nothing. No typing dots. No follow-up. Just digital silence that felt exactly like the real thing. Then came the email from Rebecca. I was cleaning up my inbox, archiving work threads, deleting store promos I never signed up for when her name popped up. Subject line, about the wedding. No greeting in the preview, just those 3 dots. I opened it. She wanted to clear the air. She said she did not want things to be weird on her big day. There was a line about understanding that emotions were high at lunch. Then the ask. The registry. The honeymoon fund. The bridesmaid gift contribution she expected from me, even though I was not a bridesmaid. I could feel my jaw clench as I scrolled. Me. I'm not contributing. That was it. No hi, no explanation, no softening words to make the truth easier to digest. No hi, no how are you. Just the truth. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second afterward, that old instinct screaming to add something more. I appreciate the invite. I hope it is a beautiful day. Maybe next time. I did not add any of it. She replied within minutes. Rebecca. Wow, real mature. You're gonna let one lunch undo 20 years of family? I stared at that line for a long time. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me, the glow of the laptop screen turning her words into something almost physical. Because that was it, was it not? That was the story they wanted. One lunch, one scene. Me, overreacting. Me, dramatic. Me, throwing away 20 years of family because I could not take a joke. They thought the family was made of blood and birthday cards, Sunday dinners and group photos, holiday text threads with snowflake emojis, obligations dressed up as traditions. I knew better. I had seen what it was really built on. Unspoken debts and emotional blackmail disguised as loyalty. Favors that came with strings you were never allowed to cut. Expectations that grew every time you met them. And the moment I stopped paying the toll. The moment I stepped away from the collection booth they had built at the edge of my life. I was exiled, pushed to the edge of their narrative, turned into a cautionary tale before I had even finished breathing. But here is what no one ever teaches you about walking away. It is not a cliff, it is a staircase. And every step down feels a little less like falling and a little more like flight. It does not feel heroic. Not at first. It feels awkward, wobbly, like your legs forgot how to move without someone else telling them where to go. But each small no, each boundary, each moment you do not answer a call that will cost you your peace. That is a step. That week, I closed the family phone plan. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a legal pad beside me, the same way I had done 100 times before. Only this time, I was not adding more to my plate. I was taking things off. I pulled up the AT&T account, looked at the names on each line. My mother, my brother, Rebecca, the tablet. Devices I did not use but had been paying for years. My fingers hovered over the mouse for a moment. Then I started clicking. I drafted an email to all of them. Clear subject line. Upcoming changes to shared accounts. Gave them a 10-day notice through email. Attached copies of the new auto payment cancellations, account transfers, and insurance termination dates. I laid it all out in simple language. On this date, this line will be removed. On this date, this policy will end. Here are the numbers you will need to set up your own coverage. Each email was professional, polite, and copied to everyone. No side conversations, no secret warnings, no backdoor favors. I kept it clean, no insults, no dragging up old fights, no emotion on the page, just numbers, just proof. This is what I have been doing. This is what I am no longer doing. Here is enough time for you to adjust. Mom tried to call twice. Her name lit up my screen while I was at my desk. Once in the afternoon, once at night. I watched the phone buzz on the table, felt the old reflex rise up, the one that said, "Answer her, answer her, answer her." I did not pick up. I let it ring out, watched it flip to missed call. My chest felt tight, like there was a band around it, but I reminded myself of the staircase. This was a step too. Her third attempt came through as a voicemail. I saw the notification bubble appear. One new voicemail. I stared at it for a while before pressing play. Her voice was clipped, almost shaky. "Mom, I don't know who you think you are, but this is cruel. You don't treat family like this." The word cruel landed like a stone in my stomach. That was the first time I cried. Not because of what she said, but because she really believed it. She believed I was cruel. After everything. After years of paying, carrying, buffering. After late night calls and early morning transfers. After every time I had dropped what I was doing to fix something she had broken or ignored. I was cruel for stepping back. I sat on my couch with the phone still in my hand, and tears finally came. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, almost quiet. The kind you do when something old finally gives way inside you. That was when I realized I would never get closure from them. Not the kind I wanted. There would be no tearful apology, no moment where my mother took my hands and said, "I am sorry I put so much on you." No dinner where Brian looked me in the eye and admitted he had taken advantage. No late-night message saying, "I'm sorry I took you for granted." There would only be silence or blame. Those were the only two languages my family spoke when faced with their own reflection, so I stopped waiting. Waiting for them to wake up. Waiting for them to call me something other than selfish. Waiting for them to acknowledge the things I had done without being shamed for the one thing I refused to do. And I started building. I took myself off every account with their names on it. Called banks, called insurance companies. Sat on hold with that same tinny music. But this time, the end result was my name getting removed instead of added. I shredded the emergency contact forms where I was still listed for Brian, the ones he had filled out years ago and never changed. Forms at his job, at his gym, at his doctor's office. I emailed and updated what I could. I told him in one short text, "You need to list someone else from now on." I changed the locks on my condo. Not because I thought they would break in, but because my mother still had a key from the days when she would drop by without asking. That key had started to feel like a threat. I called a locksmith on a Saturday morning and watched as the old lock came off and a new one slid into place. I stopped answering. "Can you just" texts. "Can you just spot me till Friday? Can you just talk to the bank for me? Can you just help with this one thing?" I read them. I put the phone down. Sometimes I typed out a long response, then deleted it and walked away. And slowly I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace. It did not come all at once. There was no big wave of serenity washing over me in some dramatic moment with soft lighting and inspirational music. It came in pieces. Just a quietness in the mornings. I would wake up, and my phone would not already be buzzing with some mini emergency waiting for me before coffee. No overdraft alert. No long paragraph from my mother about how hard everything was. A stillness at night. I could sit on my couch with a book or a show, and my mind was not constantly spinning through numbers, wondering what bill was about to hit my account next. My phone stopped buzzing. My inbox stopped flooding. The constant digital tug on my attention eased, and I realized this was not loneliness. It was space. Space where their needs used to live. Space where their chaos used to spill over into my calendar and my bank account. Space I could finally breathe in. It was the week before New Year's when I saw her again, at Kroger, of all places. I was reaching for a box of peppermint tea, one of those random cravings that only hit during Michigan winters, when I caught a glimpse of her near the self-checkout lanes. My mother. Same camel-colored coat she wore every December. I could have picked it out of a lineup, mid-length, belted, a little too formal for a grocery store under fluorescent lights. Her hair was still perfectly sprayed into place, not a single gray out of line, but her posture, different. She looked smaller, not physically. She still had the same frame, the same careful makeup, the same gold earrings she wore to church. But in that way, people do when they've run out of control to hold on to. Like someone had let the air out of whatever invisible thing kept her standing so tall. Kroger was busy, carts bumping, kids whining, somebody's baby crying in the next aisle over. The speakers were playing some overplayed holiday song, the kind that loops every 15 minutes until you want to han scream. The smell of bakery bread and citrus and spilled coffee hung in the air. Normal, loud, alive. And there she was, in the middle of it, alone. She didn't see me at first. Her cart had just a few things: cranberry juice, dish soap, frozen peas, essentials, no party platters, no bottles of wine, no overflowing cart for some big family gathering. I watched her tap the screen at self-checkout with slow, unfamiliar movements. She squinted a little like the prompts were in another language. Judy was always the one who made other people do things. At the store, she would hand over the coupons and stand back, while whoever was with her bagged everything. At banks, she'd slide forms across the desk and say, "Can you just?" Always had someone to help, someone to handle. Now, she looked like a woman figuring out how to exist without a script. Without a daughter standing next to her to punch in the phone number for rewards or scan the digital coupon on her app. Without a husband to stand there and pretend to know what was going on. Just her, a cart, and a glowing screen asking her to make choices. I stood there, fingers wrapped around the tea box, my body half turned toward the aisle, half anchored to the floor. For a second, I felt that old instinct kick in. Walk over. Help her. Fix it. Step back into the role like it was nothing. I almost walked away. I could have turned right, gone down the cereal aisle, finished my shopping, pretended it was just a coincidence the universe had no interest in pressing any further. I could have kept the distance clean, paid, gone home, told myself later. Yeah, I might have seen her. Not sure. But then she turned and saw me. It was like one of those slow-motion movie moments, except there was still a kid screaming about fruit roll-ups and someone arguing with the coupon machine 2 lanes over. Her gaze slid past the gum rack, past the elderly man digging for change, and landed on me. Her face twitched, caught between shock and pride. Her eyebrows lifted just a fraction, then pulled together. For a second, I saw the old script try to load. The one where she smiles and acts like nothing happened, or tilts her head and goes straight for guilt. My chest tightened, waiting to see which version she'd pick. Mom. Melissa. It didn't sound like a greeting, more like an accusation wrapped in breath. My name came out flat, no warmth, like she was testing how it felt to say it out loud in public again. Me. Judy. My voice came out calm. Too calm. Like I'd rehearsed it in my head 100 times, which, if I'm honest, I had. Not here, not at Kroger in the tea aisle, but in my car, in the shower, on walks. Imagining what it would sound like to say her name like she was just another adult, not a god I owed worship to. She took a step forward. I didn't. Her boots made that soft thud on the linoleum, her cart's front wheel wobbling a little as she moved. She closed a bit of the distance between us, but I stayed where I was, one hand still on the tea, the other curled loosely around the handle of my basket. My heart was beating hard, but my feet didn't move. Mom, I didn't raise you to be like this. There it was. No hello. No how are you. Straight to indictment. The line she'd been saving. The one that turned any disagreement into a moral failing on my part. Me. You didn't raise me at all. It slipped out before I could soften it. No filter, no edit. Just the truth, coming out in the middle of Kroger under buzzing lights and a plastic Happy Holidays banner. People walked around us, pushing carts, scanning items, existing. But I didn't regret it. As soon as I said it, something in me settled. There was no lightning strike, no dramatic gasp from strangers. Just that invisible click inside like a lock turning. She blinked. Not a flinch. Just a pause. Like her system glitched. Like her brain tried to pull up a file that wasn't there. Mom, the martyr. Melissa, the ungrateful one. The script didn't account for me saying it out loud. For a beat, she said nothing. Just looked at me like she was seeing a stranger in my face. The lines around her mouth looked deeper, like she'd been holding on to her anger like a cigarette, letting it burn her from the inside. Mom, you're really not coming back, are you? Her voice was smaller on that line. Less edge, more confusion. As if I'd moved out for college and she was just now realizing I had my own life, as if walking away from the financial umbilical cord was the same as running away from home. I looked at her. Really looked. Not as my mother. Not as the woman whose approval I'd spent decades chasing. Just as a person in a Kroger, in a camel coat, with frozen peas and cranberry juice, and a tightening grip on a life that wasn't built to stand on its own. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. Not even anger. Just distance. Space where the old hooks used to be. Me. No. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just one syllable that closed a door that had been hanging crooked on its hinges for years. She nodded once, a quick, jerky motion, then adjusted her bag on her shoulder like it weighed more than it should. The strap slipped down her arm and she yanked it back up, her hand trembling just slightly. It was the first time I'd seen her carry her own damn bag without handing it to someone else. I expected her to walk away, to snap something bitter and leave me standing there. A parting shot about how I'd regret this one day, how I'd understand once I had kids of my own. But instead, she said something that froze me. Mom, it's not the money, you know. Her voice had this weird edge to it, brittle and defensive at the same time, like she was trying to salvage a piece of her image for herself. Like if she could convince me and herself that it wasn't about the money, then she wasn't. The kind of person who measured love in dollars she didn't pay. Me. It never is. Until it's gone. The words slid out of me, low and steady. And that was it. No tears, no grand apology, no supermarket reconciliation where we cry in front of the cereal display and hug it out like some made-for-TV movie. No screaming match that gets us kicked out by a frazzled manager. No bystander stepping in to tell us to calm down. Just that strange, unfinished moment between two women who used to share a house. And now couldn't even share silence. She left before I did. She turned her cart toward the exit, wheels squeaking, and walked away without looking back. The automatic doors opened for her with a rush of cold air, and then, just like that, she was outside, folding herself back into whatever story she'd decided to tell about me. I stood there a little longer, hand still on the tea box. The peppermint smell drifted up faintly as I shifted it into my basket. People moved around me like water around a rock in a river. A kid bumped my hip with his tiny cart and mumbled a quick, "sorry," before rushing after his dad. A teenage cashier laughed too loudly at something her coworker said. And I thought about all the versions of this scene I'd imagined, the late-night brain movies. Me crying, her begging, some explosive fight where I finally got to say everything I'd stuffed down, or the Hollywood moment of forgiveness, where she'd suddenly realize how much she'd hurt me and pull me into this tight hug under soft lighting while the music swelled. Some Hollywood moment of forgiveness or fury. But real life? It's quieter, more hollow. Just two people standing in a grocery store saying almost nothing and meaning everything, and somehow more honest. Because in that awkward little exchange, she told me exactly who she was. And I finally believed her. That night, I lit a candle in my apartment. No big meaning behind it. No cleansing ritual. Just the scent I liked. Vanilla and cedar. I bought it on sale at Target because the jar was pretty, and the label said cozy fireside. And for once, I wanted something that was just for me. My apartment was dim, except for the kitchen light over the sink and the warm flicker from the candle on my coffee table. Outside, the wind was rattling the windows, carrying little bits of winter against the glass. The heater kicked on with a low hum, filling the place with a steady, comforting noise. I sat on the couch with my feet tucked under me, soft socks on, an old hoodie thrown over my leggings. My hair was pulled up in a messy bun that would have made my mother cringe. Netflix asked if I was still watching. I let the question sit on the screen for a while and just listened to the tiny crackle of the candle wick. My phone was face down on the table. No buzzing, no demands, no, can you just, lighting up the screen. And I realized I wasn't thinking about what they'd say if I didn't show up for New Year's brunch. Didn't picture my mother ranting to relatives. Didn't picture the empty chair they'd point at as proof I'd abandoned them. It just wasn't there. The mental slideshow of their disappointment had finally stopped autoplaying. Because they weren't my calendar anymore. They weren't the fixed points my year was supposed to orbit around. No more circling dates in red because I had to be there. No more building my schedule around their expectations and then being called selfish anyway. They weren't my obligation. They were people I used to orbit. A system I'd finally slipped out of. I was free. Free in a way that didn't feel loud or dramatic. Just steady. Like the first deep breath after you've been holding your stomach in for years. Like taking off shoes that never really fit and finally feeling the floor under your feet. And I wasn't going back. It was the week before New Year's when I saw her again. At Kroger, of all places. I was in the tea aisle, in this oversized gray hoodie and leggings, hair shoved up in a messy bun, pushing a cart that had exactly 4 things in it: spinach, eggs, Greek yogurt, and then I saw the peppermint tea. One of those random cravings that only shows up in Michigan winters, when the air outside feels like it wants to bite your face off, and your whole body just wants something hot and sweet and minty. I reached up for the box, fingers brushing the cardboard, and that's when I caught a glimpse of her in the reflection of the freezer door, near the self-checkout lanes. My mother, same camel-colored coat she wore every December. I knew that coat. I remembered being 18, watching her try it on at Macy's, turning in the mirror, saying, "It looks expensive, doesn't it?" Like that was the entire point. Back then, my dad had still been alive. Back then, coats were just coats. Her hair was still perfectly sprayed into place, that helmet-style blowout she loved, not a strand moving no matter how much wind she walked through. Pearl earrings, red lipstick, not smudged. To anyone else, she probably looked exactly like herself. But her posture? Different. She looked smaller, not physically. Judy wasn't suddenly frail. She was still that same compact, put-together woman who used to walk into any room and silently announce she was in charge. But there was something in the way her shoulders curved in, the way she held onto the cart handle like it was the only thing keeping her from tipping. The way her head tilted down at the screen, instead of up like it always was when she was telling someone what to do. That's the thing about control. When people lose it, It doesn't always make a sound. Sometimes it just shows up in the slope of their back. She didn't see me at first. Her cart had just a few things: cranberry juice, dish soap, frozen peas. Nothing extra. No big holiday spreads, no bunches of flowers, just survival items. I watched her tap the screen with slow, unfamiliar movements. She hesitated between buttons, pressed one, then leaned in to read the instructions. Backed up, tried again. This was the woman who used to stand at the front of every line and complain if the cashier took too long. The woman who would shove forms at me or my dad or my brother and say, "Here, you do it. I don't have time for this." She was always the one who made other people do things, always had someone to help, someone to handle. Now, she looked like a woman figuring out how to exist without a script, without a partner to buffer her, without a daughter quietly fixing things in the background. Just her, and a blinking screen asking if she had any coupons. I stood there in the tea aisle feeling that familiar clash in my chest, the part of me that grew up under her roof. That old reflex that wanted to step in, to take the scanner from her hand, to punch the right buttons and make it easy. And the other part, the one that walked out of that restaurant, the one that had finally added up the cost of being helpful. I almost walked away. I had my hand on the tea box. I could have just dropped it in my cart, turned down the cereal aisle, pretended I hadn't seen her. Let her stay blurry in the edge of my vision. Just keep moving. But then she turned. Just a small pivot, reaching to grab one of those flimsy plastic bags. Her eyes lifted for half a second, and she saw me. Her face twitched, caught between shock and pride. Her eyebrows shot up, then pulled down, that tiny wrinkle appearing between them. Her mouth parted like she was about to say something biting. Then she seemed to remember where she was. Who might be looking? For a second, I watched all the possible versions of her flare across her face. The cold one, the dramatic one, the pleading one, like she was flipping through masks and couldn't pick which one to wear. Mom. Melissa. My name came out flat. Not warm, not soft, not surprised. It didn't sound like a greeting, more like an accusation wrapped in breath. I felt my jaw tighten. My fingers curled a little harder around the tea box. Me. Judy. My voice came out calm. Too calm. Like I'd rehearsed it in my head 100 times, which, in a way, I had. In therapy. In my car. In the shower. The first time I'd said it out loud to Carla, my therapist, I'd felt guilty for days. But standing there under Kroger's fluorescent lights, it just felt accurate. She took a step forward. The cart's wheel squeaked as she nudged it out of the way. We were maybe 6 feet apart now, close enough that I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the way her lipstick had bled a little at the corners. I didn't move. Mom, I didn't raise you to be like this. There it was. Straight out of the script. No hello, no, how have you been? She just went right for the throat she expected to hit. She said it like she was still the one with the authority, like my entire adult life was some project she'd started and I'd ruined by going off plan. Me. You didn't raise me at all. It slipped out before I could soften it. No editing, no smoothing, no extra words to make it sound less harsh. But I didn't regret it. As soon as it left my mouth, I felt something unhook inside me, like a knot that had been in my back since I was 14 finally let go. She blinked. Not a flinch. Not outrage. Just a pause. Like her system glitched. Like her brain tried to pull up the file where she was the devoted single mother who'd done everything, and for a second, it couldn't quite load in front of someone who'd actually lived it. Her hand flexed on the cart handle. She looked at me like she was seeing me and also trying really hard not to. Mom, you're really not coming back, are you? Her voice dropped on that one. Some of the edge was gone, not all of it, but enough. She wasn't talking about a place. She was talking about a role, about stepping back into the pattern, back into the group chats, back into holiday planning and emergency bailouts, and you know how Melissa is. She'll take care of it. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I didn't feel that rush of guilt. I didn't feel my throat choke up with all the things I hadn't said yet. I didn't feel anger spike up either. Just distance. Like watching a scene from my old life through glass. Me. No. My voice didn't shake. No apology, no explanation. Just a simple, solid answer. She nodded once, sharp, like the answer hurt and she didn't want to show it. Then she adjusted her bag on her shoulder like it weighed more than it should. The strap had slipped down her arm, and she yanked it back up with a little more force than necessary. I expected her to walk away then. To snap something bitter, toss out a last insult, and leave me standing there with my peppermint tea and a fresh bruise. But instead, she said something that froze me. Mom, it's not the money, you know. There was this desperate little tremor under the sentence, like she needed me to believe that. Needed herself to believe it even more. Not the money, not the phone plans, not the insurance premiums, not the card I'd used to bail them out. She wanted it to be about something bigger, something more noble. Respect. Values. Family. Me. It never is, until it's gone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. I just said it. And in that one line, we both knew exactly what I meant, because if it really wasn't about the money, those failed login attempts wouldn't have happened. The sudden panic over canceled plans wouldn't have happened. The voicemail calling me cruel for stepping back wouldn't have happened. And that was it. No tears, no grand apology, no dramatic hug in the middle of Kroger while strangers pretended not to watch. Just that strange, unfinished moment between two women who used to share a house, and now couldn't even share silence. Her mouth opened like she might say something else. For a second I thought, this is it. This is where she cracks. This is where she says, I'm sorry. But she didn't. She just closed it again, gripped the card handle a little tighter, turned. She left before I did. Her cart squeaked away toward the automatic doors. They slid open for her with that soft whoosh, cold air knifing briefly into the warm store. Then they closed behind her, and she was gone. I stood there a little longer, hand still on the tea box. The peppermint smell faintly seeped out when I squeezed the cardboard. My basket hung from my other arm, heavier now with more than just groceries. A kid ran past me, giggling, chasing his brother. A woman in a red coat argued with the coupon scanner. Two teenagers stocked shelves, moving slowly, laughing at some inside joke. The world kept moving, and I thought about all the versions of this scene I'd imagined. In my head, for months, maybe years, I'd played out the reunion. Me crying, her breaking down. A messy, ugly fight in a parking lot. Me screaming every hurt thing I'd never said. She gasping and suddenly seeing herself clearly for the first time, her begging, saying she was wrong, saying she didn't realize, saying she would do better. Some big Hollywood moment of forgiveness or fury, something that would make good TV, something with a soundtrack. But real life? It's quieter, more hollow. There's no dramatic score. Just the beep of self-checkout machines and the hum of bad ceiling lights, and somehow, more honest. Because there, in that silence between us, she told me exactly who she was. Someone who could say, it's not about the money after years of taking it. And I finally told her, without begging, without yelling, exactly who I was now. Someone who wasn't coming back. That night, I lit a candle in my apartment. No big meaning behind it, no ritual, just habit. Just the scent I liked. Vanilla and cedar, melting slowly into the warm air of my living room. The flame flickered against the glass jar, throwing soft shadows on the wall. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows. Cars hissed by on wet streets. Somewhere in another unit, someone laughed too loud at something on TV. I sat on the couch with my feet tucked under me, a blanket around my legs, mug of that peppermint tea cradled in my hands. I leaned back, staring at the low glow of the candle, and I realized I wasn't thinking about what they'd say if I didn't show up for New Year's brunch. I wasn't mentally preparing excuses, wasn't calculating the emotional cost of going versus not going, wasn't picturing my empty chair at their table as Exhibit A in their case against me. They weren't my calendar anymore. They weren't the fixed points my life had to rotate around. No more circling dates in red ink because you know how your mother gets if you don't show. No more building my vacation days around who needed me most. No more guilt texts if I dared to put work or rest or my own plans first. They weren't my obligation. They were history. Important history. Painful history. But still history. I thought about everything that had led here. Every late-night transfer. Every just this once. Every joke at my expense about how I loved money more than family, while my card quietly paid off debts they pretended didn't exist. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. This was my blueprint. Not for revenge, for power. The same skills I used to manage their chaos, I could use to build my own stability. The same attention to detail I'd poured into their lives, I could pour into mine. Budgets with my name at the top. Boundaries as non-negotiable as due dates. Relationships where love didn't come with invoices or interest. I thought about my therapist's words. You're not selfish. You're exhausted. I wasn't exhausted anymore. I was emptied out. And that meant I finally had room to fill my life with things I actually chose. I thought about New Year's, about what I wanted it to look like if I took everyone else out of the equation. Maybe it would just be me, on this same couch, in these same socks, watching the ball drop on TV with a glass of champagne I bought for myself. Maybe a couple of friends from work, the ones who didn't ask for money but did show up with soup when I was sick. Maybe I'd write down what I was done dragging into the next year. I didn't know exactly what it would be, but I knew what it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be me sitting at a table, swallowing my feelings, paying the bill, and being told I owed them more. I took a slow sip of tea, mint and warmth and quiet. And I felt it again, that same thing I'd felt the night I walked out of Langford's. Stronger this time. Rooted. I was free. Not the kind of free that means you don't care anymore. I cared. I would probably always care on some level. That's the curse and the gift of being the one who pays attention. But I was free from the contract no one ever admitted I'd been signed into. Free from being the safety net they cut holes into and blamed me for when they fell through. Free from having to prove I was a good daughter by bankrupting myself, financially and emotionally. I set the mug down on the coffee table, watched the candle flame dance, and I knew, deep in my chest, more certain than I'd been about anything in a long time, I wasn't going back. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.